Okay, so we are live. Welcome to this week's installment of Startup Weekly. This week, I am joined by Borja Cuan, who is the co-founder of Four15 Digital, a full-stack digital marketing agency helping businesses grow online. So Borja, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Gordon. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So just by way of introduction, Borja, maybe could you give us a little bit more background into yourself and then I guess how 415 Digital came to be? And I know from us chatting before that you've got a great deal of experience in tech and online business. So if you want to maybe give a bit of a background and then how that journey led you to starting your own business.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston, about 30 miles west of the city. Um, so I grew up there, went to college, but before I got into tech, interestingly, I had always worked in hotels. Interestingly, I had an interest in hospitality. So throughout high school, I started working in a hotel during the summers, and then it started as a summer job, and then that ended up being a job I had throughout the school year, and took a liking to working in hotels for whatever reason. At the time, I was like, oh, it's an interesting job. I meet a lot of interesting people. I like the work I'm doing, and then in college, I ended up doing a year abroad in Spain, in Madrid, where I ended up doing an internship at the Ritz in Madrid, Hotel Ritz in Madrid. And it was an intensive internship course that I did where I got more exposure to different facets of the hotel industry, everything from front desk to guest relations, banquets, food and beverage, housekeeping. So I really did a 360 internship. Gave me a lot of exposure to that industry, and I ended up really liking it more. And really, at the time, my interest and aspiration was to ultimately be a general manager of a 5-star property, very similar to the hotel I worked in. So I was always, I would say, starting in high school, very much in a customer service environment, and I got a lot of training in customer service. And that was something I was really interested in doing. So when I was graduating from college, I said, well, I'm going to work at a hotel and sort of work my way up to ultimately being a GM. And I interviewed in New York at the time. I was working this summer in New York, and I interviewed for Club Med, which I'm not sure how many people know what Club Med is, but basically I interviewed for a job working for them, and was ultimately offered a job and would have been working in a Caribbean island at one of their properties. But I ended up deciding to go in a different direction. And really it was by chance that I ended up started working in tech. I, at the time, left New York and then went to Washington, D.C. To spend some time with a friend there, and a recruitment firm or recruiting firm that I had connected with. They had my resume on file. They called me while I was in New York or Washington, and they said, hey, Borja, we have internet startup here in Massachusetts that's hiring, and we want you to interview there. There's a job that we think you might be qualified for. So I ended up packing up, leaving DC, going back to Boston, interviewing for this company that was based in not far from my hometown, actually. And I remember that interview very, very sort of like as if it were yesterday, because I didn't do well in that interview. In fact, I applied for a position that I ultimately didn't get for that company, but was offered a more junior position. So I had applied specifically for an account manager position. It was an internet software company. And I remember one of the questions in that interview that was asked of me that I did not answer well. And it's so funny looking back. This is, remember, 1998. This is really a long time ago when the internet was a relatively new concept. And and I was asked what my preferred browser was, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even know what that meant. I failed. So the hiring manager was like, "Oh, this guy, doesn't know too much about internet, so let's not hire him for this position. But I think he might be good for the position below this, which is the account representative position, which is an entry level position, which for someone right out of college was perfect." So um, I ended up getting that job. And the reason I got that job was I think they liked sort of my background, but coincidentally, the hiring manager ended up going home that night after interviewing me. She was sitting at the dinner table with her family, and she said, "I interviewed this really interesting guy, and his name is Borja." And suddenly her son raises his hand and said, "Mom, Borja, like Borja Cuan?" And she said, "Yes. How do you know him?" And her son was, I think, at the time, maybe 11 or 12 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and he said he was my soccer counselor, like in one of the soccer camps, and I loved him. So she ended up offering me the job, and
That's
that
hilarious.
connection. It was just a small world.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of giving a long explanation or answer to your question, but really it was in 1998 that I started my career in tech,
Mm-hmm.
working for an affiliate marketing software company. Um, uh, and I joined them as number 29. And that company, when I left 8 years after joining, grew to thousands of people. And so in that job, ended up growing a lot. We have gone from 29 people to thousands of people. We went, I was part of an IPO, various mergers and acquisitions, and that ended up being one of the most positive professional experiences of my career.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, 8 years at that company, I ended up moving to where I am now, which is San Francisco. And I continued in that space, sort of advertising, ad tech, and
Mm-hmm.
and then yeah, it's been now 21 years that I've been in the industry.
Amazing. A wealth of experience, no doubt. So, can you talk just a little bit about the motivating factor for starting 415 Digital in particular, and maybe going from working in tech in general to wanting to kind of go out on yourself or with your co-founder and build something yourself? And I guess the maybe like the intrinsic motivator for that, and why you made that decision.
Yeah, there's probably a few things that come to mind. I think timing is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had been an employee of not many companies over my career, which is not common. I worked, I think, in 18 years, I probably worked for 3 or 4 companies, which, as you know, nowadays you look at resumes and people are moving every 1 to 2 years. And I ended up staying at one company for 8 years, another company for 6 years, and then another company for 4 years. So I think I had a track record of being pretty sort of loyal with the companies I worked for. I also was part of companies that I was able to grow in, so learning a lot, and that provided a lot of growth opportunities. So I didn't have the desire to kind of move around. I always gravitated towards smaller companies. I was not sort of as excited about working for large companies where there's a lot of bureaucracy and politics and process. I mean, I'm very disciplined in my approach, but depending on the size of company, things can get out of hand in terms of a lot of that. So I always wanted sort of work for smaller companies where you had exposure to the executive team or the founders, and you could actually work with them on projects and things like that. And I think when the way that I met my co-founder, business partner, Mike Nelson, we were both working for a company based in San Francisco, and we were part of the growth team there. And we ended up sort of forming a relationship. We had a lot in common, and we also had always been sort of client side, so we understood what it was to work with vendors or agencies, and we were always very underwhelmed, frankly, with the level of support and service we were getting.
Okay.
We felt that the salesperson did a really good job of selling a solution, but ultimately the delivery of the service was always underwhelming. And so we said, well, we've been doing this for clients for many years, managing a large amount of advertising spend. Collectively, we've probably managed over $1 billion in ad spend over our careers. We said, why don't we do this for ourselves, right? There's a lot of interest already through our network of people that are interested in us helping them. Why don't we just form an agency? And so it was a combination of meeting the right business partner to start this business with, and also just timing. It felt like the right time. We had accumulated a lot of experience over our careers that then allowed us to create a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was interesting you said there that you weren't satisfied with the level of maybe professionalism. I don't know what it was specifically, but that you were receiving from other clients or people you were working with. And that was one of the motivating factors. So is that something that you really try to focus on now with 415, and having noticed that as an issue before, is that something that you kind of have as one of your like strong pillars, I guess, of your business?
Absolutely. Yeah. Our product is our service. So we are passionate about providing really good service to the clients that we work with. Mm-hmm. And really, it goes back to my hospitality background. I would label myself as a customer service snob. Mm-hmm. Every time I walk into a restaurant, every time I walk into a hotel, a retail store, it doesn't really matter. I'm always sort of very observant of the service in those places, right?
The radar is on.
The radar is on for the good and the bad, mm-hmm. not just the bad. It's like calling out what is good there, not just what is bad, right? But I'm very much sort of focused on making sure that the service that we provide our customers is very, very good, because ultimately that's in a highly commoditized space, which we are in. There are many, many people that do what we do. You have to create some distinction, right? Some points of differentiation in a very hyper competitive space. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's really what I care most about is how we service our clients, because that's ultimately going to be the most important client retention tool that we could provide. Mm-hmm. And my experience has always been that service was underwhelming, and that was one of the turnoffs for me, right? Mm-hmm. I felt like I was led to believe that something was going to be better than it was. And so I think we spend a lot of time making sure that not only are we hiring the right people, but once we hire the right people, ensuring that they're getting the needed training, right, to be successful in their careers and to be able to deliver the service that we promised our clients. So yes, service is a core pillar of ours.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about client service there and bringing up the model that you're working with is obviously service delivery and working with clients on an ongoing basis. So who is your typical ideal client? And for me, when I think about it, and I think anyone who's listening to this will find this interesting, but I'm immediately thinking like e-commerce brands or other online businesses. But do you find that they're typically the people who want your services most, or are you finding a lot of offline businesses wanting to make the move online? And what are you seeing in that regard? I'm kind of asked two questions there, but I guess the first one is, who is your ideal customer? And then are they a lot of kind of online first businesses or also kind of brick and mortar retail?
Yeah, I think it's diverse is the short answer. We have quite a bit of diversity in the clients that we work with. Our business, as you sort of explained to start, we're helping companies market their product or service across three primary ad platforms, mm-hmm. Google Ads, Facebook, which includes Instagram, and LinkedIn. So those are primarily the channels that we're focused on. There are other things that we do, but at the core, that's where we are investing most of our dollars. We currently manage about $120 million in annual advertising budgets on behalf of the clients that we work with. And those clients, the profile of those clients vary. On one end of the spectrum, you have a local business with 2 brick and mortar locations that does $4 million a year in annual sales. So that's one of our clients. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have a $3 billion a year in annual revenue business that is global, right? With no brick and mortar presence. It's pure online. And then sort of everything in between. We have B2B, enterprise level, small business to business. We have, business to consumer. Categorically, it's quite broad. So we find that the criteria that we have in bringing clients on has changed. Now we are approaching 4 years old. We opened our doors in April of 2017. So our, I guess, criteria has evolved a bit as we've gotten bigger and we've matured and we've had more experience in working with a variety of clients. We have a better sense for what's important to us. But typically speaking, yeah, I mean, it's I would say a company that it could be e-commerce, doesn't have to be e-commerce, a lot of lead gen businesses, but you have to have some level of investment that you're willing to commit to digital, maybe $10,000, $15,000 a month minimum, with the possibility of scaling. We also work with clients that are just going to market with the product, an MVP version of the product. So they've never generated a sale or advertised on Facebook and Google, and we're sort of helping them enter the market. So we have those clients as well. Y Combinator clients that don't have a lot of money, but are looking to kind of raise Series A maybe, and they need some market proof before going to the investment community, seeking out financial capital. So it's very broad. Lot of different variety. I think also criteria, for me, a big part of the criteria when I talk to people is sort of what's in between here. Do we think alike? Because I think, the product or the service is important, but also the team that you're working with is really important, because the journey of making a program successful is not necessarily always smooth sailing. There's a lot of ups and downs. And so I want to make sure that whoever we're working with understands that, right? And they're willing to make the commitment needed to see this through. I think oftentimes people think it's a set it and forget it type of program where you turn it on and sales will start coming in and everything is good. But that's not the case. It's a lot of work, a lot of labor, and patience is required, because there's a lot of testing involved in media, as you know. So you can't expect things to work on day one. And even if they do, things fatigue over time and need to be sort of changed up, tested, and things like that.
Totally, yeah. You made an interesting note there with regards to maybe early stage startups that you said might approach you for getting exposure before they go and raise capital. So I was thinking, I thought it was interesting because I guess some people would take the approach where they would want to try and have like recurring revenue and have maybe somewhat of a semblance of product market fit before they go and start spending thousands upon thousands on advertising or trying to raise funds. But it's interesting that you made that point, in that you have people who would come to you to like market before they go and raise money just to get more exposure. And I guess it's something that I hadn't thought about doing it that way. You know what I mean? Before, but it's very interesting. You see that.
Yeah, and it's not typically an opportunity that we get excited about unless we really believe in the product so much,
sure.
Because it's a lot of pressure, and frankly, there's not a lot of money, right? They don't have a lot of money. They might have seed round, but they're not really financed heavily. So they're coming to us and almost asking a lot. And usually the ask doesn't correlate with the amount that they're willing to pay. And so it becomes challenging because the goals are hefty, and they want to do it very quickly, because they want to be able to say, as part of the storytelling to prospective investors, hey, our user acquisition grew 1,000%. We started with 3 users, and now we have 200,000 users. And so
Mhm.
it's not always, we prefer, I would say, people that have some amount of proven sales, right? Have been doing this for a
Yeah.
bit, have some historical data that we can look at to start identifying areas of improvement, things like that. But, depends on the opportunity. I mean, sometimes you want to get in very early with a company and be part of their growth journey because, we've worked with, in fact, we have some Silicon Valley unicorns, right? We have some
Mhm.
companies that are now valuation of billion plus that we were part of that journey early on when they, were just starting. And a company that comes to mind is Flexport. They're in the freight forwarding category, and they engage with us very early on.
Mhm.
Now they're valued at multiple billions of dollars, and SoftBank injected, I think it might be $1 billion in capital into that business. So there's a lot of exciting reasons why we kind of want to join early on sometimes, but more often than not, it's more challenging than worth. So
Yeah, absolutely. And we're experimenting with stuff ourselves at the moment, and it's always a challenge to continuously refine the process and then look at the data and iterate. And it's what you mentioned. It's never set it up and it's just done. We're trying to continue to like tweak advertisement creatives and see what's working and like double down on what's working, try cut out what's not. So I think for anyone who's wanting to get into it, that's always worth remembering as well. But I'd love to ask Borja just about the nuances of building out a digital service agency, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think oftentimes the value is inherent in the employees that you will be taking on. And you've already briefly mentioned the employees, but they are kind of like the gold of the business, I guess. They've got the skills to be able to implement and set up campaigns or work with these clients. So I guess, is there any nuances or intricacies of building a digital service agency that you find most interesting, or that you think other people may not be aware of if they wanted to build something similar?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the greatest asset we have is the people, right?
Mhm.
And I think most business owners will tell you that because the people are who are on the front lines working with clients. They're in the trenches. They're representing your brand. So it's really important that you spend a lot of time in seeking out the right person for your company. And every
Mhm.
company is different. What's important to me may not be important to you when you're interviewing candidates or when you're looking for candidates to fill positions, because my business or the business that I have with my business partner, the objectives might be different, right? The way that we service our clients might be different. The way that we communicate with our clients might be different. Our styles might be different, right? I might be more traditional. You
Mhm.
might be more casual, yet it's the same effect and the same outcome is created, right? So for us, we absolutely value our team. We believe that, the reason we have clients stay with us is because of our team, right?
Mhm.
Because the hard work that the team invests in the client relationship. And I think that is probably at the top of the list in terms of points of differentiation or
Mhm.
value proposition that we offer, right? Because it's, as I mentioned before, very competitive. There's, everybody has worked with, I've talked to a lot of our clients and I've surveyed them and I said, well, what's the main reason that you're looking to make a change from your current partner? Or what's the biggest sort of value you get from us? And a lot of the times it comes down to the team that they're working with, right? That they're providing a lot of value. They're helping my business grow. They're solving various marketing problems that I have. And so the more you invest, when you think of starting a business, the more you invest upfront in your team, uh, the better your business will perform, right?
Mhm.
And by investing in your team, I'm not just talking about training and making sure that they're really good and they're experts at Facebook and Google and they understand how to use the tool and the
Mhm.
technology. That's obvious, right? We need to be sort of experts in the platforms that we're buying media on. but I'm also in talking about just investing in relationships, right?
Mhm.
In getting to know your team, not just professionally but personally, right? What's important to them, what makes them happy, um, what are their goals, and how, what makes them fulfilled, right? As employees, because I think people, especially now, have a lot of options, right? And they're constantly being approached by other companies to work for them, and so it's really on me as a business owner to ensure that they're very happy and fulfilled here, right? Professionally, financially, emotionally, like it's checking all the boxes,
Mhm.
because my fear is losing people that I want to work for the company. And so I think you can never invest too much in your team. And it's really ultimately the most important thing, or one of the most important things of having a successful business.
Totally. I think, I guess it must be one of the most frustrating was the word I was about to use, but when you put in so much effort into training people and developing them, and having employee churn as just something that you have to deal with, it must be tough for businesses, um, to, especially large size service businesses, to deal with that churn rate. And obviously putting in the effort up front on an emotional level as well as a skill set level, like you said, is how you try to mitigate that risk. But ultimately, I guess it's still it's going to happen no matter what. And I guess it's a matter of you trying to deal with it. But yeah, it's a great point. And like, the employees are the biggest asset at the end of the day.
Yeah, and we've had that, right? We're now 4 years old, so we've had people that have been with us that have left. People that we didn't want to leave, they've left on their own terms, because in one case they decided to change careers, so they went into something completely different. Um, in other cases, they found a better opportunity for themselves. And so you do your best, but as you said, you know, it's uh, it's part of the deal, right? Like that just happens. And for me, the most important thing is I tend to want to part ways uh, amicably with employees. If they decide that they don't want to be here, then I'm okay with that. I've always had a very strong feeling in a personal and a professional relationship that if someone doesn't want to be with me, then I don't want to be with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to try to convince someone to stay doesn't feel natural, because they've made a decision, and I need to accept that, respect that,
Yeah.
and just let them move on. Right? As much as I want them, you only want to be with people that want to be here, because what happens is if they stay, even though they don't want to be here, you start noticing that in their performance and their attitude,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's just not a healthy
Yeah.
situation for anybody. So I'm very good about saying, okay, you said to me you don't want to be here. I've listened to you, and as much as I wish you would want to be here, some things are just not meant to be, and I respect that, and I want to help you in however I can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not healthy when it gets to the point where you're clashing heads and you've not got something similar to be working towards. And if everyone's not on the same page, then it's not helpful for anyone, like you said.
Yeah.
So moving on, Borja, I wanted to ask, like, obviously you've alluded to the fact that you're a full stack digital marketing agency, but what do you find is the number one thing that you are helping clients with?
I'd say at the end of the day, um, it really comes down to, depending on the client, but let's just say sales for the
Mhm.
client. Like they're really all about growth.
Mhm.
Um, so we do a variety of things, but I would say the core service offering is really around media buying. And so media buying on the channels that I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
And so I think most people come to us to help them manage their advertising dollars across those channels, and tying that investment to sales.
Mhm.
So it's really about growing their businesses, because no matter how much they like us and enjoy in a non-COVID world, having dinner with us or playing golf with us or whatever activity we do together, everything we do has to generate sales for the client or leads or something, some success metric that matters to them and helps them grow their business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say typically they're trying to, solve those types of challenges that are really around growth. And there are other things that they might want us to solve. But at the end of the day, it all ties back to, I need you to manage my advertising dollars, and I need these
Mm-hmm.
advertising dollars to generate a positive return on ad spend, or you need to hit a certain customer acquisition cost goal for me, or cost per lead goal, or cost per qualified marketing lead, whatever the metric is. It's very direct response oriented, which actually aligns well with us because we have a DR, or a direct response background, as co-founders. My business partner and I, we've come from that background. So for us, understanding the analytics and the data behind these marketing programs is at the sort of essence or core of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody comes to us and says, hey, I want to get more brand exposure, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I want more people to see my ads. I'd love one of those clients because that would be a very easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But everybody that comes to us is after a very specific desired goal, which
Yeah.
typically ends up being sales, revenue, leads, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that's, one of the biggest marketing problems that we're solving for people. They haven't been able to crack the code on how, Google hasn't worked for me. Can you help me figure that out?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I haven't been able to achieve customer acquisition cost goal that I have on Google
Mm-hmm.
or Facebook, or you know what, we can't generate leads on Facebook. It's a great lead gen tool, or sort of upper middle funnel tool for marketing, but we can't figure it out. It's not working for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's when we come in and we basically do an audit. We'll basically ask them for access to their accounts. We'll look at what they're doing on Facebook and Google, and we'll basically audit their programs and then make recommendations on what we would do if we were in the driver's seat managing their campaigns, and identify what those gaps are. And so it's usually solving Google or Facebook specific challenges that they have in using those tools to scale their businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's results oriented by the sounds of things on what you're saying, and people want to see that return on ad spend. So let's flip that on its head for a moment, because you've been building 415 Digital for 4 years now, almost. And what has been your main approach to growth since the inception of the business 4 years ago? I mean, obviously, you've built it to the stage where it's at now, and you've, I'm sure, had a number of different methods of growing over the years. So what has been your main approach, and and how has that kind of panned out over the past 4 years?
Yeah, it's been, I think if you ask my business partner, he might say we're growing too slow. Or he wants to grow it faster. I think we have taken our business has grown year over year. We actually are, financially very healthy. We've been profitable since our first month in business. We have no debt, and a very healthy business, which is great. And I think we have sort of intentionally stayed small because we believe that's directly tied to sort of points of differentiation. I've used that term a couple times today.
Being agile, and
what's that?
Having the ability to be agile, or like,
yeah,
stay small, stay fast. Yeah.
Yeah, we believe small can be good, right? Now we want to grow more than 12 people that we are today. We want to grow to maybe 20, 25 by the end of 2021 would be a great achievement. If we can double our growth, I think that's kind of the goal we have in mind. But we also want to keep it small enough, or boutique size, where clients are able to experience the I guess the high touch service. Because I think when you get too big, and this is my opinion, not to say that if you're big, you can't provide really good service, but that's a lot of times what clients have a problem with when they come to us, is they say, work with this agency, this big reputable agency, but then on day one, we were assigned this really junior person, and they lacked strategic experience and guidance, and they didn't pay attention to the details, and they didn't have as much knowledge as we thought, uh, things like that. And so we promised ourselves that we would not be that agency, and that we would grow. We want to grow, but we don't want to grow too big where then we have account managers that are managing 20 accounts or 30 accounts, which is actually pretty common in the agency world. On average, our account managers are managing somewhere between 4 and 6 accounts. And we do that intentionally so that they're able to develop deep and intimate relationships with each of their clients rather than sort of spread their time over 20 or 30 clients, are actually able to really understand each of the clients' businesses, be a trusted partner, provide strategic consultation, things like that. So I think I think we are always wanting to balance having enough people to service the demand, but we're also very selective with the clients that we work with, and we turn down opportunities that we don't think align well with our goals and objectives. So I think, we want to grow. I would probably say we're probably not going to be bigger than 25 people. As an agency, we want to kind of maintain a small and intimate team. We want to keep our client portfolio, reasonable in size, right? Maybe we get to 75 or so, 60, 75 clients. And we believe that's the recipe for success for our business. And it's going to keep our retention rates really high, which is ultimately the most important success metric for us as a business, is looking at how long are clients staying with us. Because as I mentioned earlier, it's a grind of a business, the agency business. I'm not going to misrepresent it. It's you're only as good as your last month, and clients are very fickle and hard to please, and they're always looking for something fresh and new.
Yeah.
So no matter how good you are, sometimes they'll break up with you, even though you're doing well and having record months. And you're like, well, why are you breaking up with me? This is the business has been great. And it doesn't always make sense, but this is just the industry we're in. Things happen. People want to change every few years and try something new. And, someone comes in and says, well, I can do it better. And so it's just kind of the nature of the business. It's, the agency business. You don't typically retain clients for 10 years. Unless you have a personal relationship with someone and they're, they don't change positions or leave that company. It's typically, there's a lot of, there's attrition.
Yeah, for sure. In the vein of what you mentioned there about like clients looking for new and fresh ideas, one thing I wanted to ask you was, what are some of the kind of larger trends that you're seeing in digital marketing or marketing services at the moment? And are you guys trying to capitalize on any of those trends that you're kind of seeing?
Yeah, and I think that question comes at an interesting time. With COVID and sort of the pandemic that started in Q1 of 2020, I think the landscape has changed quite a bit. For us, we were actually, as an agency, beneficiaries of a COVID environment. We didn't see our business shrink. In fact, we saw it grow. And that's primarily because most of the companies or businesses that we work with or that we have in our portfolio are in categories that sort of benefit from more consumption online. We had a few clients in sort of in the travel category or education category that scaled back their advertising budgets, but everyone else was actually investing more in Facebook and Google. And so I think e-commerce was up 18%. Retail sales were down 10%. I think are the statistics that I've read. We've seen more investment of advertising in Facebook and Google. I would say, depending on the sector, if you're in the travel sector, if you're selling tuxedos or formal wear, you're probably pulling back on advertising because a lot of people are not investing in some of the channels that we focus on. But if you're in the fitness category, if you're in online courses or some of these other categories that are home cooking, or there's just other categories where people are just or consumers are spending more. You're actually starting to really use these tools more and more, because you're realizing that that is where your customer base is. And ultimately for us, in every engagement that we have, it all comes down to the goal being, how do we reach our customers, and where are our customers spending the most amount of time right now, right? It's all about audiences. And so what we find is that between Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn, you're usually investing in two of those three channels if you're working with us, right? You may not be investing in all three, because one of those three might be cost prohibitive. But generally speaking, you're investing in one of those, or one to two of those three channels. And for us, of the $120 million in annual advertising budgets that we're managing now, I'd say about 60% of that is coming from Google, 30% is being spent on Facebook, and then maybe 10, let's call it 10 to 15% is on LinkedIn. And so I think a lot of people are sort of re-examining their advertising strategy. Where should I invest? The cost of inventory is changing with this increased competition now going online. So it's like, for them, all about, how do I get in front of my client? What's the right messaging? Can I scale? And there's a lot of volatility too, because there's not this constant sort of uptick in sales. It really depends on, the platform, the time of the year, and things like that.
I think everyone, businesses, personal brands, etc., everyone's having to be a bit more creative in how they approach things with the COVID situation, as well as the result of that being more competition maybe in the marketplace. And I think it's interesting because it kind of harkens back to what you mentioned earlier about the customer service being kind of a differentiating factor. And I think that customer service on a deeper level is maybe what people are coming to expect more of, in light of the fact that there's more competition and maybe the results aren't the same as they were for ad spend. So I don't know, are you kind of seeing the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's all about customer experiences, customer service, interactions. There's a lot more competition, as you see. People are just coming out with products or services. The barrier of entry seems to be a lot lower. And so I think differentiation, customer service, all of those things matter. And for us, when we work with a lot of these businesses, it comes down to content, right? Like, and this is particularly important in a B2B environment where content is typically king. But I would say, yeah, all of those things are critical in the success of any marketing campaign. It's creative, it's messaging, it's video, it's articles, white papers, webinars. There's just all of these different things that you could be doing online as a way to engage with your customer. And so that's when we start talking about, it's, a nurturing process, right? You're not going to get a sale necessarily in that first interaction. And that's why it's important to collect some information that then allows you to, in turn, communicate more with the consumer, right? You're sort of, you get a lead. Okay, now that you have a lead, that lead expressed some level of interest, but they haven't purchased your product or your service. So now that gives you the opportunity to communicate with them. You send them an email, you send them a text message, you further educate them on why your product or service would benefit them. And then, it might take you 3 or 4 months and 6 or 7 emails, but eventually you get them to buy your product or service, right? And maybe in one of those communications, it wasn't the coupon or the discount, but it was a piece of content that you served them that they connected with, right? So it's really about the effort you put in sort of the nurturing process for a lot of the clients that we work with. It's not as easy as putting an ad up, sending them to a registration page, sign up or register. That's just a piece of the process, right? You have to then take that and continue to market to them in different ways, different mediums. Obviously, mobile is critical. But we just find that those are all the things that you need to do to be competitive, and you need to have a very comprehensive strategy around that. And that's typically how we approach marketing. We talk about funnels, right?
Mhm.
You have top of funnel, you have middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. So there's a lot of different tactics that you employ depending on the stage of that consumer, and all of that is sort of important as you build out a media buying strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how do you think about the intersection of marketing and social media? Because they've kind of become synonymous in the digital space, but obviously before social media, there was 100 different ways of advertising and marketing. But I feel like, so for anyone who's been involved with social media and marketing, have seen how it's changed the way that consumers interact with brands and how that's evolved over the past decade. So I guess I'm wondering, do you have a unique take on that, or is it something that you are actively like on top of and constantly thinking about for change and all these different platforms?
Yeah, I mean, it's you're talking to someone who actually personally doesn't use social media. I'm
Okay,
anti-social.
okay.
So it's actually interesting.
Yeah,
There's somewhat of a conflict of interest because my business generates a lot of revenue from social media,
yeah.
because a lot of our clients are investing in social media. Um, but I personally am a bit anti-social media. I watched the. Did you see the? Oh God, it's escaping me. The documentary that was done with a few of the former Facebook executives. The social.
I've heard about it, but I haven't watched it yet. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I'm more in the camp of the social dilemma,
yeah.
which is too much Instagram, too much Facebook is detrimental to people's mental health and things like that. But that's maybe for another conversation.
Mhm.
But I do think, yeah, I mean, it's critical. I mean, I would say that we don't have one client in our portfolio that doesn't consider social media a critical element of their marketing program.
Mhm.
It's really for us, the paid and the non-paid stuff. But I would say every conversation that we have usually has a mention of Facebook, and LinkedIn is a social media network, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's professional centric versus more Instagram or Facebook, which is to me a little bit more personal than professional. But yeah, I would say we have noticed an increased investment from our clients in Facebook. And we used to be, I would say, 90% Google, 95% Google in terms of advertising. But what we found is that Facebook is starting to take a bigger piece of the pie in terms of advertising. And yes, there have been advertisers that have, decided to stay away from Facebook for political reasons. There's been things that have happened in the US that, and people are like, oh, we're anti-Facebook. There's been political reasons. But I would say in general, as a percentage of the ad spend, that Facebook continues to be a larger expenditure. Not to say it's taking away from Google, but we're just seeing more investment in Facebook. And we oftentimes see Facebook, when we compare some of our Facebook and Google campaigns, Facebook starts faster. And what I mean by that, the performance tends to be a little bit better than Google
Mhm.
when you start. I mean, we're talking about two different mediums, right? I consider Google more hand raisers, people that are sort of searching for something very specific, versus Facebook. It's more, again, going back to the funnel, it's more top of funnel marketing, right? Top to middle,
Mhm.
where you're trying to get, there could be cold marketing there, maybe some more marketing, but it's we find a lot of times that Facebook and Google, depending on the client, could be better performing to start, but then Google over time catches up in terms of performance, and then sort of they're at parity. But yeah, I mean, social is absolutely a part of every conversation. We need to be very sort of in tune with the changes that are happening, because they're every day. And social also includes Snapchat and TikTok, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Which is not something that as an agency we've really focused on. because it's more it's younger than typically our client is after in
Sure.
terms of generational age, but
Mhm.
those are also part of the topic from time to time, and maybe something depending on the client that we need to start thinking about because there's more eyeballs there.
Yeah, it seems like I've been on it a little bit, and it seems like, yeah, there's just, well, particularly the younger demographic, there's just so much attention, so much eyeballs there at the moment. So that's awesome. I have to ask you, Borja, as well, about just what is it that you love most? Oh, sorry, I got your name. I pronounced your name wrong there a second ago. But
Okay.
what is it that you love most about what you do? And like, obviously, having taken the step to go down the more entrepreneurial route the past few years,
Yeah.
what is it that you love most about having taken that step?
I think I like the challenge that having a business presents.
Hmm.
I've always been someone that really enjoys problem solving, and I think when you start a business, that's pretty much a big part of the job, right?
Yeah.
It's just a constant challenge, right? We talked about people, hiring people, retaining people. Um, client services, things like that. I mean, figuring out how to scale a business, how to continue to innovate and keep ahead of trends. So I really like the challenge of it. I like the
Hmm.
people that we work with. I mean, obviously, you're spending a lot of time working, so enjoying the team that you work with is important. You also have to like the clients that you're working with because if you don't, it shows. So I don't directly work with clients, but I have a lot of exposure to clients. Monthly, I'm talking to clients, checking in with them, surveying them, asking for feedback, things like that.
Hmm.
So I really like the challenge of being a business owner. And the team working with the people every day is very fulfilling. I really think if you didn't enjoy working with the people, it would not be so exciting.
Absolutely. I think there's some great words of wisdom for anyone who wants to go down that path and take that first step, you know. So what is next for 415 Digital over the course of maybe the next few months? What's on the roadmap as we move into 2021?
Yeah, I think for us, it's just focusing on growth for the next 12 months. We want to double our team in size.
Mhm.
So we have quite a bit of aggressive hiring needs that we need to fulfill, um, and just constantly look at ways to improve our service. Right? I said it. I'll say it again. Our product is a service that we offer our clients, and so want to make sure that the team has everything they need to be successful. That includes just constant. We do a lot of training, um, different types of training, hard skill training, soft skill training, um, and and just continue to do good by our clients.
Mhm.
Our goal is to really have our clients stay with us as long as possible. So for me, I'm very passionate about improving the service offering, making sure our clients are happy, making sure that we're driving performance for them, and you know. We've been very lucky in that most of our business has come through our network or references from clients. We have done very little, if any. Maybe one client has come from sort of a non-referral. So I think it's always a great place to be when you're not investing in advertising to generate clients, and it's all coming from word of mouth
Mhm.
network. And so I think the way you do that is by just continuing to care most about the client, and that's really what we do. And I think there's constant ways to make what we do better, make our team better, and and if we focus on that, of just being super passionate about that, then I think we'll probably in the end do well, and continue to grow as a business.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm sure if you continue in the same vein that you have done, you'll continue that growth as we move into the new year. Um, Finally, Borja, I'd just like to ask, from your experience and being in tech and now in the entrepreneurial space, what is your number one piece of advice for anyone who wants to start their own business or go down the route of entrepreneurship and working for themselves?
I think it would depend on the person. My answer might depend on the person, what I know about that person. In some cases, I might say, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that person, right? In other cases, I would, I might talk them out of it, right? Knowing what they're about to get into. I think it's just understanding really what you're getting into, right? Talking to other entrepreneurs to understand what the journey is really like, because I think there's a misconception of people, on what it really means,
Mm-hmm.
right? To be a business owner. I think people get very focused on social media and what people have achieved at the end state instead of understanding what it took from the beginning to end, right? I've been in the industry for 21 years. Um, I started a business a bit later in my life, but I think you have to be willing to endure the good and the bad and enjoy the good and the bad, because there will inevitably be high points and low points. And if you're only looking for high points, then you're going to be very disappointed. For me, I actually enjoy both. I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the good and the bad, and I'm still happy being a business owner because I have no misconceptions that being a business owner or growing a business is going to be easy, right? We have very low points. There's a lot of disagreements that we have along the way, but ultimately, you have to be willing to go through that process, exercise a lot of patience, be willing to uh, take the good with the bad, and you know, and take a lot of risk, right? There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
risk involved with foregoing a salary and benefits and things like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you're willing to understand that, um, then then try it out, and also just be really hyper focused on your product, right? Like that's the key. Is if you really spend most of your time on how to make your product or service better, and you're very customer centric, and you understand that customer service is critical, and you're only going to retain customers if your service, in our case, is really good, then you'll probably be in a much better position to succeed. You may not
Mm-hmm.
succeed, but at least you'll put yourself in a much better position to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Great words of advice, because it's yeah, I think it's a very challenging endeavor to take upon yourself to go down the route of trying to build something, and especially if you're going to do it full time. And I think you summed it up nicely, because there's always going to be very tough days, but then taking those with a pinch of salt along with the good days as well. So I love how you summarize it. Um, so Borja, if people want to find out more about 415 Digital, they can find it at 415digital.com. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for today's chat. It has been great to get your insights on building out a digital agency, as well as what you see going on across the whole space in general. So thank you so much for all of it. And I wish you the very best going into 2021.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and happy New Year to you.
Absolutely. Happy New Year. And thanks again. Cheers.
Thanks, Gordon.